DW Africa Link. Leave the girls alone. In parts of Nigeria, a daughter can still be used to settle a debt. It's a practice known as money marriage, where young girls are forced into unions they didn't choose, sometimes before they even reach their teenage years. Now, while it's been outlawed, the tradition continues quietly in remote communities, turning childhood into a transaction and leaving many girls trapped for years. So why is this still happening? And how can girls be better protected? That's what's coming up. I am Eddie Micah Jr., and you are welcome to Africa Link, the podcast connecting you to the stories that matter. Africa Link, every weekday here on DW. In many cases, families facing extreme poverty, crop failure, medical bills, or other financial pressures agree to pledge a daughter in exchange for money, livestock, or goods. Sounds bizarre, doesn't it? The girl usually has no say in the decision, and in some instances, she may still be a child or even an infant when the arrangement is made. I'm sure you're eager to know more about the so-called money marriage and why it's still going on. So let's bring in Hassana Maina, a lawyer and gender consultant. I also have my colleague Abiodun Jamil, DW correspondent in Abuja, Nigeria. Hello, both of you. Welcome to Africa Link. Abiodun, I tried to explain money marriage to our listeners, but you have done extensive research and reporting on this. So tell us in your own words, what exactly is money marriage?
Thank you, Eddie. Earlier this month, DW went to Cross River to document the practice of money marriage in Nigeria. For context, money marriage is a traditional practice that existed and still underground in parts of Cross River State. Essentially, it's a system where girls, sometimes very young, and even promised before birth, will be given out to men in exchange for money, livestock, or as a way for family to settle a debt or obligations. And what's particularly striking in this particular practice is that these girls are treated as a form of payment, right from when they were given out till death. They had no say in the arrangement, and once they are handed over, she became a property or a form of payment throughout lifetime. Even if the husband she was given to or the man she was given to died, she is usually passed on to other relatives, other members of the family. Just like we have Christentia AG, who we spoke to, when the man she was given to died, the family still maintained a hold over her, and she was, betrothed to a young boy. And in fact, it was even the man that said it before he died, that the girl should be given to one of his youngest sons. So young girls are treated as property, as a form of payment, and that practice has been going on for long. Even though it has been abolished, we have still had cases where it is still practice underground because enforcement is weak, and these are communities where state presence is non-existent.
Right. You did a report on this for us. I'm just going to let us hear some of the clips from that report because it is quite revealing.
It's a barbaric practice and tradition that should never have existed in the first place. Girls and women are not commodities. They are not items that you use to settle, to clear your debt or whatever. The practice itself is a violation of the rights of these young girls. It robbed many of them of a future.
I won't say I am particularly familiar with the concept or with the practice before the DW report, which gave me incredible insight into this sort of practice that would consider barbaric. It's a kind of practice that shouldn't exist anymore in Nigeria in this present age. It's greatly affect young girls who grew up, especially young girls in that kind of environment, who grew up believing or thinking that their value, the only value they are worth is to pay debt.
And I don't think it should be in existence anymore. I don't think this practice should be something we should have to talk about or see in our society anymore, because by doing this, a girl child is not safe. By giving out a girl child that has nothing to do with it, with the debt that was collected by a family, father, uncle, or whoever it is that took the debt, and using your girl child as a settlement is wrong, especially in marriages.
Abiodun, really deep report, and thanks for digging into this topic for us. One thing that stands out to me is the fact that it's abolished and it's still happening, but also how widespread is it still?
Yeah, officially, the practice has been abolished, and there has been lots of advocacy and community level engagement, to bring it to an end. From what I saw and heard on the ground, there's a strong consensus, at least publicly, that it should not continue. But in in local communities, or places that are not in town, or maybe local communities, there is still some form of practices of this money marriage, and this is because these are communities that that do not have state presence. These are remote rural communities where enforcement will be very, very weak. In fact, it will be very difficult to get state government or officials to go into those. And secondly, the fact that this practice is not documented. It's not like there's a paper, there's an agreement that was signed by the party or between the party. It's strictly just word of mouth and age-long cultures, and cultures takes long time before they die. Also, it's important to note that this practice is also seen as a form of social status, especially among the rich in those communities, because it feels like if you don't have a money woman in your house, that's the time they call the woman. If you don't have a money woman in your house, it means that you are not wealthy enough. So it becomes quite very difficult to curtail when people have this kind of mindset in across the communities.
Thank you very much, Abiodun. Look, Hassana, this is serious, isn't it? How does it make you feel that even though it should have been abolished by now, it's still happening?
Thank you so much, Eddie. It makes me feel very angry. It makes me feel extremely angry. But it's also not a surprise, because if you look at certain harmful cultures against women in Nigeria, it's pure exploitation. It also comes from the way people look at women, the way fathers look at girls, the way mothers look at girls, the way society look at girls. And that's why sometimes when a girl is being given birth to, it's often always like, oh, you found someone to help you wash plates, or oh, you found someone that will be the bringer of bride price. We conclude a woman's future from birth, and then the conclusion is often always not flattering. Abiodun mentioned how it's a status symbol to have a money woman in the house. And these are also, I would like to argue, the legacies of colonialism, because we also saw during colonial times how colonial masters had local women in their houses. There's so many documentation of this. And it's so unfortunate that even as we continue to expand and we continue to grow as a people, that our own people still see women, as chattels. And that's why I often always argue that patriarchy is a global phenomenon, and misogyny as well. It's practiced differently everywhere, but at the core of it comes the disregard of women as a people and the seeing of women as chattels whose future should be decided for. It's quite unfortunate, because if you listen to the report and you look at the report, you would see when these women are finally given the chance to explain how they feel, how they describe that feeling to hell, how they describe the fact that people tell them, you are a money woman, so why would you go to school? So why would you? It really is quite unfortunate that a woman's, instead of us to sit down and think about how we can empower women to become industry builders and industry leaders that were exploiting women to continue to degrade them and break them down. But it is a culture, right? And it is something that we're actively working on ending.
I really appreciate how deep you've gone into this, the role of culture, the role of colonialism, and in simple terms, how most men see women, the role of women in society. And then that is why it was good news, or it's supposed to be good news, that it has been officially abolished. What does that really say if the law doesn't seem to be working, Hassana?
Thank you so much for bringing that up. And, I think it's for us to really sit down and question how we look at women. But outside of doing that is also to look at the law. When the law is backing without a teeth, it's not threatening anybody. And why is it that the law backs without teeth when it comes to the issues of women? Should we say that our institutions are biased against women? Perhaps, it's a question for all of us to ponder upon. I did a consultancy for the UN Women where we went to communities to talk to community leaders and co-create legal guidelines to abolish some certain harmful practices. And like I said, at the core of it, what I found out is there is just a certain level of exploitation. So even when we say, oh, we've abolished this, and then the price of fuel goes up and there's a certain level of inconvenience, fathers already now start to think, oh, I have a daughter that I can give to this rich man. So at the end of the day, even though it's been established that nobody is a slave, it seems that women are still seen as, slaves or something to be exchanged. So that's why the law has to have a teeth. The law has to be able to bite whoever it is.
Right. Thank you very much, Hassan. Look, Abiodun, I really want to understand the government's position. I'm assuming it's not just us DW reporting on this. There's different media outlets that are touching on the fact that this issue still persists. Any response from the government about this? Is there any sense that it is being taken seriously?
Yeah, Eddie. When we reach out to the government, immediately the stories out, or when we were on the field, what they just made is still the same promises they've been making over and over again. That it is that the state is committed to protecting the rights of everyone, and calling from the Nigerian Child Rights Act. And that was exactly the position of the state government, that they are working essentially, and that was even the reason why the practice was abolished in the first place. But at the same time, while we remind them that there are still pockets of some of these practices in rural communities that we visited, they still maintain their position that they are working on it, that traditions takes time to die. That was some of the things that we got from the state government.
Which, if you ask me, is a very flimsy excuse that tradition takes time to die. If something is wrong and the government believes it is, then as we've all said and are on the same page with, that it has to be dealt with and women should just be free. Hassana, moving forward, solution-oriented, what is needed? Are we talking sensitization, education? One would argue that's happening and still this is continuing. But on the flip side, looking at a glass half full, will more of that be the way forward?
I definitely think more of that would be the way forward. But then we must constantly ask ourselves, what is the status of women today as we find ourselves in this country? Poverty is synonymous to being a woman. Globally, 1 in 10 women live in abject poverty. So perhaps we must think about, the sensitization that we're doing. We must think around, policy creation. We must ask difficult questions and hold government accountable. We have a national gender policy. It's not being put to effect. And we see year in, year out that, these things just do not have any effect. And sometimes even the person in power that is supposed to put, we talk about 35% affirmative action, for instance, and the person in power doesn't do it. Who is there to hold the person accountable? So all of these things are things we must focus on. But at the same time, we must also understand that nobody should be above the law. Not traditional leaders, not traditional rulers, nobody is above the law. And the law must back and the law must bite. And I'm saying that because just of recent, we have had what happened in Orozo community in Delta State, where they talked about the festival where women are not allowed to go out. And some women were out, and we saw videos of sexual assault against these women. In my opinion, everybody in that community that has sanctioned it and that has seen that happen and has allowed it, needs to be held accountable. It cannot be business as usual. The best form of sensitization and awareness is for people to actually see that there are consequences for actions, that impunity is not the response to abuse of fundamental human rights, that women are human beings as well. And when their rights are being violated, that the state would stand up and act. Unfortunately, that's not what we're seeing. We've seen reports where, the police are saying there have not been any rape, while we all saw in video that there were cases of sexual assault, that women were being dragged from on top of a bike. So these are things that we must address, and we must address collectively. But goes back to the point that the law must be able to bite. The law, especially when it comes to cases of gender-based violence and domestic violence and rape and women exploitation, it always conveniently ends as it's a domestic issue. No, it's not. It's a fundamental human right issue. It's a public sanctity issue, and it must be treated as such.
What does justice look like for survivors and victims of this?
Justice, survivors' case cannot be handled collectively. It's a case-by-case basis. So I think what it would look like for the community is for perpetrators to be held accountable to the full extent of the law, is for us to see the law working. For survivors, justice perhaps is a return to status quo. It should never have even happened to begin with. But now that it has, it's for certain kinds of responsibility to be taken. We are living in a country where sexual assault referral centers are underfunded, where they are available, and then in most places they're not available. So the state also has to rise its responsibility of ensuring that there is certain level of responsibility being taken to ensure that the psychological, the social, the emotional support of survivors is being met, especially when such heinous crime happen to them. I think that this is the least that the state owes to survivors, especially because they are citizens of a country, and the country owes them protection. But on a community level, is for us to see that perpetrators are being held accountable, and that they are not being hidden under the shield of it's a domestic issue, or it's, to sweep it under the carpet. If one or two perpetrators are being held accountable to the full extent of the law, perhaps we would see very less of this. So justice, accountability, but also the state should rise up to its responsibility to ensure that survivors are well taken care of.
Right. Thanks, Hassan. Abiodun, on a community level, is there any sense, based on some people that you've spoken to, that there is a growing paradigm shift away from this practice, which ultimately affects the girl child and woman overall?
Yeah, generally in the community, depends on who you ask, because in the community, there is still a sense of defensiveness, among people in the community, that the practice is not as widespread as it used to be, which shows us that the issue isn't completely settled. So that's why I said depends on who you're asking. Among the traditional rulers, they are open to sensitization. They've been open to sensitization. In fact, the community leader, Mr. Sunday Ichile, that we spoke to, has been one of the forefront, defender of this practice. I mean, of young girls that I went through this particular practice. Christentia told me that she still faces stigma, but whenever issues like that arise, she reports to the traditional ruler, and the traditional ruler take immediate actions on it. But that is just at the traditional level. But within individuals, within communities, there are still, some kind of support for the practice, because more like it's a symbol status, like I said. So there are still some of support for the practice. In some communities, there are still people, young people that are still, under, still kept in the system that has, subject them to such hardship, to such cruelty. But for many members of the community, it is still a sense of indifference, to be honest, because some of them sees it as culture, as something that they are used to. Now
Right.
to see these girls no longer be part of it, and the fact that they are also seeing the importance, the the empowerment that some of these girls that are freed are given, I think to some of them, yeah, they are open to a new normal of the total eradication of the practice. But generally, yeah, there's a general sense of acceptance that the practice is no longer in vogue among local communities in the area.
Thank you very much, Abiodun, for that. And now the final words go to you, Hassan Amaina. We're talking policies, initiatives. What should the government prioritize and do now to ensure that the next generation of girls are fully protected?
Thank you very much. The government must think about gender-forward policies. For instance, it's inexcusable that Nigeria has one of the highest number of out-of-school for the government. So these are areas that they must prioritize. Perhaps if girls are in school, randy old men would not be looking to make wives out of them or sex slaves. I think that's most appropriate in that regard. Gender-forward policies in the case that we must constantly think around how women can be part and parcel of so many of government initiatives, So the crumbs should not only be going to women. Women also deserve to sit at the table and, take part of the bread, not just the crumbs. So when you're talking around initiatives around agriculture, initiatives around finance, initiative around whatever, construction, buildings, the government must have forward gender policy. So women must be part of those that have certain briefs from the government in terms of contract, in terms of, women must be empowered, but not just as lip service or word of mouth. No, women must fully be empowered. And, we must find women where they are, and we must ensure that we are able to empower them truly, women in the market, women mothers, how can we ensure that they're able to have a certain level of financial independence? Research have shown that if a woman is empowered, if a woman has money, if a woman has source of income that is independent of anybody, the woman's children just get better. Just look around you. Any woman that's educated, that has her work, that has some form of agency, her child is most likely not to get married at a young age or to be part of a money wife or all of those dangerous practices.
Right. Thank you very much, Hassana Maina, for that really informative and educative discussion. I have learned a lot from all of this. I literally have my pen and paper out, taking notes. It takes the whole village, so to speak, to deal with challenges. And as men have to really back this, make sure that that law is being implemented. And so all the men listening to the podcast right now, that is a responsibility that you need to embrace. Because think about women as your sisters, your partners, your mothers. And I think that throws a different perspective light onto it if you look at things that way. Thank you very much for that. Hassana Maina, lawyer and gender consultant, and Abiodun Jamil, DW correspondent in Abuja, Nigeria.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having me, Eddie. It's nice having this conversation over again.
Get the stories that are shaping the continent here on Africa Link.
At the end of the day, it is the girl child that suffers. Abuse, lack of education, and poverty later in life. There is a growing loud cry for the government to fully crack down on the practice of money marriage. Activist groups say that many survivors struggle to reintegrate, and some face stigma after breaking free of such marriages. So indeed, more help and support is needed from the government, community, and religious leaders, and indeed everybody. And to the families that allow their daughters to go through such ordeals, think again. Share your thoughts with us on Facebook at DW Africa. Listen on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. And subscribe to our DW Africa YouTube channel so you never miss an episode. This show was co-produced and edited by Isaac Mugabe. And I am Eddie Micah Jr. Thanks for listening.
DW. Made for minds.